Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. A great article here from Mike over at Light Reading. I'll leave a link to it in the description so you guys can check it out. So T-Mobile is pursuing major agreements for spectrum swaps. So when I made the longer video on the T-Mobile price increase and what that was for, you guys heard me say they have to be competitive, not just on gaining customers and growing the company, but also financially. They have to be financially sound to be able to buy spectrum, to own and not lease. All of that plays a factor into the price increase. But there's also the fragmented issue, right? The fragmentation, doing spectrum swaps to make your spectrum more contiguous. Well, T-Mobile pursues major spectrum swap with AT&T and Verizon. As T-Mobile continues to refine its spectrum holdings, it is swapping spectrum with AT&T and Verizon across PCS, AWS 700 megahertz, 600 megahertz, and 2.5. For those of you who are not aware, 700, 600, that's low-band spectrum. PCS and AWS were considered around the mid-band for LTE. And then 2.5 is T-Mobile's mid-band 5G, where all the action happens. The fast speeds, the FWA, all of that today happens on T-Mobile's 2.5. So let's get right into the details. The T-Mobile agreement with AT&T covers PCS, AWS 1, AWS 3, and 700 megahertz licenses. In some of the exchange, each carrier will be assigned the same amount of the spectrum that it is receiving, but in other exchanges, one carrier or the other will gain some spectrum. AT&T said that after the exchanges, its overall spectrum holdings will remain below the FCC spectrum screen, while T-Mobile said it will exceed the agency's screen in 4 instances. I don't anticipate that to be a big problem. We're really just down to 3 big competitive networks, right? Dish is there, but they're not doing much of anything, right? Financially, spectrum-wise, building-wise, Dish is not really doing much. So you have really just 3 carriers that are trying to swap spectrum, that are trying to buy spectrum. So eventually they're just going to go over the spectrum screen. So I think the FCC will be okay with that, and there needs to be a new spectrum screen to come out. They need to adjust. The FCC first introduced its spectrum screen in 2004 to prevent wireless network operators from gobbling up all the market's available spectrum, thereby blocking rivals from acquiring it. The screen is generally triggered when any one company acquires more than 1/3 of the total suitable and available spectrum for commercial services in a given market. It needs to be adjusted. We now have FWA home broadband on the wireless networks. There's smart cities, there's AI, all of that plays a factor. You need more spectrum. So that I fully anticipate the FCC to agree to T-Mobile going over the spectrum screen. The FCC has tweaked the screen a few times over the years. In 2023, the agency opened a new proceeding into the spectrum screen, potentially to adjust it again for valuable mid-band spectrum like 2.5. They have to adjust for competitive reasons as well. So the T-Mobile swap with Verizon covers AWS, PCS, 600, and 2.5 spectrum licenses. And then also, indeed, in T-Mobile's agreement with Verizon will not exceed the spectrum screen after conclusion of the transaction, but T-Mobile said it will exceed the screen in 6 markets. Despite triggering the low-band spectrum screen, the proposed 600 megahertz license acquisition will serve the public interest and promote competition, investments, and innovation, the companies argued. 600, the FCC has to let them have it. Nobody else is using it. So Verizon had it. They didn't use it. They gave it to T-Mobile. Some license. It wasn't a lot, but they gave it to T-Mobile, right? So if the FCC said no and took the spectrum back, who's going to buy it? Nobody's going to buy that spectrum. T-Mobile is the only one that has equipment deployed, that has radios deployed, that has devices that are 600 megahertz capable. I mean, it's an ecosystem that T-Mobile developed. They had to build the software around it. Nobody else in the United States is using 600 megahertz. So the only possible carrier that you could sell it to that has use for it, that for competitive reasons, right, home broadband, whatever, in rural, is T-Mobile. They're the only ones that would have any use for it. Now, if there was more of it available, right? Maybe Verizon might bite because they're in a little pinch when it comes to having a clean low band layer for 5G. But again, that's expensive, right? You have to buy it and then you have to deploy it. Verizon would have to touch every single site they have with 600 megahertz equipment. I just don't know if they see that as a feasible option in today's environment. So this is going to get interesting, right? In a way, Verizon and AT&T are helping T-Mobile gain spectrum above the spectrum screen and make it more contiguous. Of course, in return, it's going to help Verizon and AT&T as well. But as you guys saw, they are staying well below the spectrum screen still. So here's some of the context. T-Mobile, for its part, has indicated an almost insatiable appetite for spectrum. For example, just last month, the operator filed documents with the FCC to lease access to low-band 600 megahertz spectrum licenses from investment management firm Grain Management. In 2023, T-Mobile agreed to purchase some or potentially all of Comcast 600 spectrum holdings, and the deal came just 1 year after T-Mobile agreed to buy $3.5 billion worth of 600 licenses from another investment company, Columbia Capital. Like I said, nobody has use for it. So the price increases that I discussed in that longer video after the price increases were official, that's what that is for. So they can make, because if an investment firm has that 600, you're going to have to buy it for more than what it was originally purchased for. So T-Mobile bought $3.5 billion worth of 600. That's a lot, but they didn't necessarily gain it like on a nationwide scale, right? So it's a very expensive license to own, and they're trying to own it. But for example, with Grain Management, they're leasing access to the low band, which they will eventually buy because nobody else has use for it. So nobody's probably engaging in any talks with these investment firms except T-Mobile. So this is interesting, right? We have a major spectrum swap going on. 2.5 is still very fragmented. They have to really push for that. And that's what they're doing, right? There's Next Wave, there's Sonic Wave. I mean, all the companies that are out there that own the 2.5 licenses, the education, the churches, T-Mobile needs to try and strike deals little by little, but it's going to take time. It's going to take time, but eventually they will make it happen. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. See y'all in the next one. Peace.